Okay, it looks like we've stopped letting people in at the moment. We'll see as we go along. I'll begin to welcome everyone. But yes, thank you all for joining us at today's presentation on the South Wales Metro Taffs Depot, Constructing Excellence Wales Exemplar. We're pleased to get the Exemplar programme up and running again. There's been a bit of a lapse, but now we're fully up and running. We're doing a series of projects with Transport for Wales, so please do look out for those. I'm Kat Griffith-Williams. I'm the CEO of Constructing Excellence in Wales, and I'll be your chair of today's meeting. I'll also facilitate a Q&A following our presentations today. But if you do have questions for individual speakers, do let us know in the chat box or raise your hand. It would be great to have some interaction. Otherwise, I'll just wait at the end to field those questions. The event will be recorded. Sorry, hello? If you can mute yourselves for now, that would be great. And please do use the chat function on the side. So what I wanted to do is let's look at why we're discussing the South Wales Metro Taffs Depot as an exemplar. Well, an exemplar is defined as something worthy of being imitated or copied, and that's exactly what we seek to achieve in this programme. Exemplars are intended to offer good, practical examples of how to achieve best value, sustainable construction solutions. And our exemplar process combines the core principles of rethinking construction and the Wellbeing of Future Generations Act. The process identifies what actions have taken place at key project stages that have led to successful outcomes, so that this learning can be adopted on other projects. At each stage, we use industry standard matrix to back up and support the description of what was done, and all aspects of sustainability and construction best practice are taken into consideration, including economic, social and environmental factors, which all ensure that a good all-round project is delivered that does not sacrifice one aspect for the sake of another. So why is the Constructing Excellence Wales exemplar process so important to the industry, and why should you hear about it? Well, there's a number of factors. The exemplar concept embraces the key drivers for the construction industry. It shows us of the need to understand where improvements can be made from the earliest phases of the project right through to post-occupancy. It encourages design and project teams to work collaboratively to deliver whole life sustainability aspirations and helps monitor ongoing best practice. It provides us with feedback to the wider industry to take forward key learning points from successful projects and advice that can yield future successes. But it isn't just an award for a glitzy building or project. It seeks to reward normal, repeatable schemes that have been done well. The Constructing Excellence Wales Exemplar programme awards projects that are shown to truly represent all aspects of sustainability in a cost-effective manner, and only projects demonstrated that they meet a range of industry benchmarks in all key areas are considered for exemplary status. So this is precisely why we're going to be learning about the South Wales Metro Taffs Depot. Today, we're going to be hearing from Sam Taylor, the Project Manager at Transport for Wales. We're going to be hearing from Adam Davis, the Principal Project Manager for AMI Infrastructure Wales, Ian Simpson, Principal Engineer at Highways at AMI Consulting, and David Noblett, Project Manager at Allen Griffiths. And following these presentations, I'll field a Q&A, so please do get involved and share your questions with us by raising a hand or by answering things in the chat box, and we can field those as we go along. So without further ado, let's go over to Sam Taylor, the Project Manager for Transport for Wales, to start us off with the session. Many thanks, Sam.
Thank you, Catherine, for your introduction there, and thank you to everyone who's taken time out of their day to tune into this. I will make a start. As Catherine said, my name is Sam Taylor. I'm Transport for Wales Project Manager for the depot. We could go to the next slide, please. I thought it would be worthwhile just doing a bit of scene setting with what the South Wales Metro is as a programme of works. So the South Wales Metro is an ambitious multi-million-pound project, and current plans are due to take around 5 years to complete, with a significant amount of construction, engineering and infrastructure work to do to upgrade the rail network so it's ready for South Wales Metro. Some highlights of this programme of works is that we're going to be electrifying around 170 kilometres of track, upgrading all our stations and signalling, and building at least 5 new stations. £750 million have invested, specifically £738 million, to upgrade the railway lines to Aberdare, Corriton, Merthyr Tydfil, Rumney and Treherbert, which is an important part of the South Wales Metro. These lines are known as the Core Valley lines, and you'll hear the team refer to them as Core Valley lines or CVL. A number of the South Wales Metro projects are part funded by the European Regional Development Fund and through the Welsh Government. Next slide, please. So focusing more on today's presentation, this is the Taffs Depot scheme. It's a £100 million project that makes up one of the core projects for the Transport for Wales Core Valley lines. It's part funded by Welsh Government as well as the European Regional Development Fund, and will house and service 36 of the new Metro vehicles, while being the base for 400 train crew, 35 Metro vehicle maintenance staff, as well as house the South Wales Metro Integrated Control Centre, which will employ a further 52 staff. The construction of the Taffs Depot presents one of the first opportunities for Welsh suppliers to directly benefit from the investment in South Wales. If we look at the map on the right, at the bottom of that map is Taffs Village, and then at the top is the A470 running south to north from right to left. It's comprised of a few different packages of work, with the control centre on the left of the image there, a maintenance shed at the top, which will have pits for maintenance, a wheel lathe and wash plant. There's stabling lines with OLE to charge the vehicles, associated parking, and on top of that there's the Taffs Station car park, which will undergo improvements and improvements to the station itself. For the purpose of this presentation, Construction Excellence Wales, we're specifically looking at the access and egress into the depot through the bridges, which goes under Forth Blethyn, and there's associated highway works with that package of work. So I'm going to hand over to Adam Davies, who is our Principal Project Manager for AMI Infrastructure Wales. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sam. If you go to the next slide, please, Josh. Thank you. So my name is Adam Davies. As Sam mentioned, I'm the Principal Project Manager for AMI Infrastructure Wales, who's overseeing the design and construction of the Forth Blethyn Bridge and Highway Scheme. So just a little bit about our contractual position within the transformation. AMI Infrastructure Wales are employed directly by Transport for Wales to act as the managing agent to deliver the Core Valley Lines projects. AMI Infrastructure Wales have also entered into a 15-year contract to manage the infrastructure, also on behalf of TfW. So as the Principal Project Manager for AMI, it is my role and responsibility to manage the budget and programme for the Forth Blethyn Bridge and Highway works. To complete the design works, we've employed AMI Consulting to provide the design of the scheme, with Alan Griffiths as the ECI for the construction infrastructure delivery partner. Through an open and collaborative relationship across the design and ECI, we've been able to develop a scheme to safely transfer the trains from the main line into the Taffs Depot, including the realigning works of the Forth Blethyn Highway and new access and entrances into the depot and station car park. So the image on the right there just gives a very simple view of the contractual relationship. So TfW will enter directly into a contract with the IDP, who will be the principal contractor, and AMI Infrastructure Wales, who are in contract with TfW to act as the managing agent. We will then manage the NEC contract via an NEC PM, carrying out the NEC PM duties with the IDP. Okay, thank you, Josh. So a bit more specifically on the Forth Blethyn project. So this the bridge structure is to provide an access and egress into the new Taffs depot. This work involves realigning the Forth Blethyn Highway, building the bridge and creating new accesses into the depot and station car park. Due to the complexity of the works in the Taffs area, it has been challenging to ensure the design is fully integrated with all the various packages in the area. The works also form a major part of the commissioning to the overall CEWales project, therefore, it's been essential to monitor the programme closely with the various IDPs. This has been achieved through collaborative work in between TFW, AIM Infrastructure Wales, AIM Consulting, and Alan Griffiths during the ECI phase. So to get to the position where we are today, we are currently at the phase of completing detailed design. We have a planning application in with the local authority and hoping to start these works in the very near future. I'd like to pass on now to our principal engineer for the scheme, Ian Stimson.
Hello, everybody. Next slide, please, Josh. My name is Ian Stimson, so I work for Amy Consulting, and I am the team leader for the highway structures aspect of the Taffs depot scheme. So I shall be giving a general appreciation of the design process, an insight into some of the actual details of the scheme, and how it's kind of developed from the start of the process to now, which is still an ongoing process. It is not complete at the moment. So the slide you're seeing at the moment is the southern end of the depot area where most of the highway structures work is going on. The design in terms of providing track entrance to the depot started off with a requirement from the rail development team and the in due cognizance of the operation of the railway that suited two entrances into the depot, and you can kind of see them there off the main line. A southern entrance underneath Cardiff Road of a single track, and a double track entrance under the bell mouth of the Fourth Blethin junction with the Cardiff Road. The slide there is kind of intended to highlight the existing infrastructure in the area that we would have to take account of in the design, and sort of running from the top down. To the east side of Fourth Blethin, there's an existing substantial anchored sheet pile wall that we would have to consider, and through which the twin track entrance would have to pass. There's next one down is the existing Taffs Bridge. So that's an existing bridge carrying the Cardiff Road over the A470 on Slip Road, which is a 40-year-old bridge that we would need to take account of as well. Minor structure there nearby is a box culvert running down the verge of the A470 Slip Road, and then from the arrowhead of that particular item would then cut across to the River Taff at the bottom. There was an existing footway earthworks ramp that provided some challenging aspects to us. That carries some heavy services from the low level at the Slip Road level up to the top of Cardiff Road level, but is also a footway access as well for pedestrians. And we can see that there's the existing Rudder to Pontypridd main line that we are spurring off into the depot, and a rail bridge carrying the Cardiff Road in that, so that we can see that there is quite a lot of existing infrastructure to contend with in developing our proposals. Next slide, please, Josh. So this is a plan on the Fourth Blethin scheme as a whole. The main bridge works are up on the right hand side there. So left to right is kind of north on the left, south on the right hand side. But the slide is just there to really demonstrate the changes that we need to make to Fourth Blethin in terms of the alignment to put a bridge under an existing road. The bottom line on the alignment at the bottom is the existing alignment. The three lines at the top kind of show their kind of curb levels and centre line levels, three of them. But what that demonstrates is that the difference in levels there at the bridge site is about 1.2 metres. So we're raising the fourth blethyn by that amount, and that is necessary to get the headroom for the required train vehicles through the bridge. Next slide, please. So at the start of the design process, as with all design processes, will be a feasibility and optioneering stage. At the beginning of those stages, there were three main structures that came into play. There would be the Cardiff Road Bridge and the Fourth Blethyn Bridge for the two entrances that I've talked about. But then, because the southern entrance would have cut off the earthworks footway ramp, that would need to be replaced as well. So the third structure in the middle there would be a pedestrian ramp structure to replace those. So we went through the various feasibility and optioneering stages, which culminated in various reports and came out with our sort of best preferred options at the end of the day for doing those. Next slide, please. So this is just the first of those structures. This will be the Cardiff Road Bridge. This time north is to the top of the page. So we've got the Cardiff Road Bridge showing there kind of north to south in position. Behind, you can see in dotted there on the plan, the closest abutment from the existing bridge that was carrying the Cardiff Road over the slip road. And in section there, we can see that developed into a concrete box structure with open U reinforced concrete retaining walls as part of the structure on either side, and the middle section that you can see there is just how close we were going to have to be to facilitate that southern entrance to the existing abutment. And we would have to take various considerations into play in installing that bridge. One of the big aspects that we had to contend with was satisfying the local authority, Rhondda and Taffs County Borough Council, in terms of road closures, so that we could keep the Taffswell village open and the design developed into this Cardiff Road Bridge becoming a jacked into position solution. And that method would have been undertaken in the space of a week's closure only. So that's how that option kind of developed. So what you can see at the very north of the plan there in the blue dotted rectangle would be some facilitation works that were not insubstantial in themselves, in that the bridge would have been built on what that would be a jacking slab offline and then pushed into position. So that was the arrangement at the end of the feasibility and option stage for that particular bridge. Next slide, please. This just shows the run through of that Cardiff Road Bridge. So from the left, top down, so we've got the existing situation looking west. So we're on kind of the depot side of things, looking towards the existing Fourth Blethyn sheet pile wall and a cross section through the Cardiff Road highway. Second slide down kind of shows the jacking slab built offline in front of the sheet pile wall, with a small supplementary wall in front of it to support the excavation. And then the third section down on the left is where the new structure comes into play, actually built on the jacking slab. Top right, the structure's then pushed in position, so it is reacted off the jacking slab, pushed into place with temporary works cutting shoes on the front of the structure, pushed through into place, and then that would have been under about a week's work, and then there would have been some follow-up works under smaller enclosures to sort out the parapets and the highway on top of that. Next slide, please. The Fourth Blethin Bridge, which was taking the 2 tracks through, and you can see how close that would be to the Cardiff Road Bridge and the jacking area. At the end of stage C, that was a bored continuous pile wall, which the intention would have been to bore the piles there, cast the deck slab on the ground and excavate underneath. That's how Fourth Blethin Bridge ended up at the optioneering phase, and then there would be approach parapets up the Fourth Blethin Highway. Next slide, please. And then the third structure at the end of the feasibility stage was the footway ramp. So on the right-hand side, you can kind of see the sorry, I can't point, but there's the curved line is the proposed track into the depot that would have interfered with the existing earthworks ramp there that carried the footway and the services. And the idea there was that we would create a new reinforced structure between the slip road and between the railway. Through a value engineering process, once that had been developed, that was quite a significant structure, and there were quite a few departures of standards associated with it, notwithstanding the fact it was a little bit steeper than you would normally expect for non-motorised users. And through some negotiation with Cardiff City Council, which is just slightly out of the area, we were able to discuss providing an alternative footway access, and so this element could be removed from the scheme, so we did not need to provide footway access at that particular location, although we did still have to provide something to get the utility services from low level to high level. Next slide, please. So as part of the design process, we've got to get ourselves involved in the BIM aspect of side of things. So we're also representing the design as part of 3D CAD models. And this is an extract from the beginning of the design phase, which kind of shows the existing A470 on slip road in the foreground, the existing abutment, and then behind it in the yellowy orange colour, the proposed Cardiff Road Bridge on the left, and the Fourth Blethin Bridge coming through Fourth Blethin, and the supplementary wall kind of in front of that. So it just gives a sort of a 3D visualization of all that I've just talked about beforehand. Next slide, please. And then that just gives a sort of forerunner to that with the jacking slab in this congested area with the bridge built on it prior to it being pushed into place. Next slide, please. And just another view of it with the footway ramp in the foreground there, having now changed to a much smaller structure just to transfer the utilities up and over the existing wing wall of the existing bridge. Next slide, please. So this just shows really all the different aspects sort of labelled up that we've had to contend with in that very small area of land, from the existing bridges over the slip roads. We've had to produce various link walls to link the structures up. An interesting one there on the right hand side is some existing trunk water mains, which are 2 large water mains serving the Cardiff area, and they proved quite difficult to locate. In fact, we did not locate them at the end of the day, but I'll come on to that in a bit. But they were instrumental in what was to follow. As well as that, we've got to link the structures up to existing structures. The opening has to be made through existing railway embankment and embedded piled wing walls for the Fourth Blethin Bridge, as you can see, sort of at 6 o'clock as we go around the labels there. are showing. So we have some railway embankment works, and as well as all this down at the station, aside from the highway structures works, there's also some replacement works going on with the actual station footbridge as well, and some protection works that would have been needed to those that were done by others within the scheme. And the extent of the supplementary wall to Forth Blethyn on the east side is kind of showed there by the double arrows at the top as well. Next slide, please. So we embarking into what was our stage E, which was the detailed design phase. So we got fairly well established with the jacking process for the Cardiff Road Bridge, in due cognizance of the council's requirements, again, to try and keep road closures to a minimum. We embarked on seeing whether we could reduce those closure times by similarly considering whether we could jack the Forth Blethyn Bridge into position rather than with the board pile solution, which was coming out as providing quite a lot of technical challenges and quite a lot of time to effect into place, really. So we started to look at the enhancement, I suppose, of the jacking, so that we would jack the one bridge in and then bring the other bridge in on a larger jacking slab and then jack that into place as well. With the land area being at the southern area of the kind of the ellipse of the depot area, land take was quite tight, and that would have meant that we would have had to jack the structure, which would become a reinforced concrete box structure of about 13 meter span, in two halves, so that the one half would be pushed in, the other half would follow it, and then the two halves would be stitched together. But the way that transpired was geotechnically, site investigations that were going on at the time as well were revealing that there was a couple of layers of risky strata, shall I say, to the project, in that there was a couple of layers of blowing sand that in the end proved too difficult to manage, and we were at significant risk of building the extra jacking infrastructure offline and not being able to realise the jacking forces needed to move the structure offline into position. So that aspect was then stopped, and we then moved that structure to be a reinforced concrete box that had been developed through the design, but then we would make it that same structure but built into position, and that would need its own temporary works to actually affect the excavation for that process, and keep the Cardiff Road open in doing so, but it would mean full closure of the Forth Blethyn Road for longer than would have been the jack solution. So we've gone through a process of trying to appease the various stakeholders as much as we can through the process, but there was a limit in the end as to what we could do, and the design kind of developed from that forward as an in situ solution. Next slide, please. So the modified sheet pile wall that we've talked about here, I've called it a modified sheet pile wall because what we had to do was take the existing sheet pile wall, and we knew for all the excavations in front of it that we would have to provide a supplementary wall in front of it. So the two kind of walls together, we've called them a modified sheet pile wall. The problems with that were we had no records at all of what the existing sheet pile wall consisted of. Could not get the records, no matter how hard we tried various sources. And so initially the design was developed on a lot of design assumptions, I suppose, really, although we did back that up with site investigation works on site to prove the likes of toe levels of the wall. And you can see at the bottom there, the wall is actually anchored. I mean, we knew it was anchored because we could see the heads on the sheet pile wall from the outside, but nonetheless, we did not know the anchor details beyond what we could see. And there were a lot of assumptions and some investigation works to try and prove those details so that we could find out what we were actually dealing with. In the end, it did transpire that we were able to get some drawings, although not as built drawings, but some drawings from the design process, but a bit later in the day. And that kind of, when we'd incorporated that in the design, the supplementary wall that had grown from the previous 3D images that had been up before, which was a fairly small wall, had grown through the design process and was now a substantial wall that extended for the full length of the existing wall itself. And you can see there that the box footprint of the bridge, which is at the bottom on the plan there, the rectangle there where the bridge is going to go, there are issues and things we've had to deal with in terms of the ground anchors crossing at a skew to the line of the bridge that we would have to excavate through. So we have to go through a sequential process of dealing with how to withdraw and make the opening through the sheet pile wall and removal of those anchors to construct the bridge. Next slide, please. So what then happened as part of the design process? So I'm hopefully building a sort of a picture here as it's all going through. There is always sort of a value engineering process that you do as you go through a design process. You know, do we need to do this? Can we physically do this? What are the risks? So there was one of the big value engineering exercises was undertaken, and the outcome from that was that we could effectively de-scope the southern entrance from the scheme so that we did not need the Cardiff Road entrance. That eliminated some substantial risks that we were carrying with these trunk water mains that were proving incredibly difficult to locate. Although where they were at their shallowest, we did locate them, and they were quite well out of position, detrimentally, compared to the utility companies, Welsh Water's drawing indications. So all that led to unacceptable risks of us potentially bursting those mains with the bridge works, potentially flooding the slip road, flooding the railway, and cutting off the water supply to Cardiff. So along with a lot of work by some other people on the railway side in terms of the timetable and the operational models of the CEWales lines and trains in and out of the depot, in conjunction with the signalling and some modifications to the track works down by Taffs station, the decision was able to be made that we could eliminate that one bridge from the works, and that simplified things simply. And it would be churlish to say that there was no cost and program savings involved in that as well, because there was the work was cut down by doing that value engineering exercise. Next slide, please. So this is just a similar slide to one we showed before, with all the de-scoping works gone. So the Cardiff Road structure has now gone. You can just see from that really that the the clutter that was shown on the previous equivalent slide has disappeared, and the works have been simplified down. Not that they're not without their challenges for the ones that are left. Next slide, please. So this is just a view now, really, just for scale as to how the Fourth Blethyn Bridge would appear. This is the view from the west, from the rail side. Next slide, please. Kind of shows the elevation from the depot side. in conjunction with the other structures and a few sections there as to how we have supplemented supporting the existing sheet pile wall with our additional wall by propping between them and infilling between them. And then on the approaches to the bridge, we've had to deal with the increased height of fourth blething by the addition of separate reinforced concrete parapet bases that will take what you can see there is steel post and rail parapets that will lead into the concrete parapets over the railway aspect. Next slide, please. And again, just a couple of the 3D images now as a change from the previous 3D images with the descoping works as to where we are currently with the design process, with there only being one bridge there now, with the modified sheet pile wall being supplemented for its full length. There's an additional sort of gabion wall on the right hand side there to continue that element of the works to deal with the raising height issue of the alignment. The final slide, please. I think it's the final. No, quite just a view on the opposite side from the railway side of the same again getting an appreciation of the structure works leading up fourth blething on the east and west sides leading into the parapets, and the proposed cutaway of the earthworks embankment from the railway into the depot as it stands. Next slide, please. So there's been quite a few challenging areas. There's quite a process. I hope I've been able to paint a picture of how it's developed from start to end, and the sort of reflections that we've taken as we've gone through the process to produce the kind of the optimum design at the end of the day, from the sort of the box jacking side of things and consultation with the various specialists in that field that had taken place, and the various sequencing that we've had to do to try and affect that, and you know the dealing with the sheet pile wall issue and the lack of records. And you cannot point out how important it is that clients retain their as-built records, you know, for the entirety of their ownership. It's an important aspect. It's always missed at the end of design. I don't say always missed, but sometimes missed, more in the past than these days. But they're vitally important for future developments. Challenges with the site investigations and the ground conditions, with the blowing sands that we've had to contend with during the design. And an aspect that we've not really touched on too much that Dave Noblet will probably touch on a bit in a minute will be the temporary works aspects, and dealing with not only those water mains I mentioned, but the area is heavily laden with all the usual utilities, medium pressure gas, 11 kV, BT, various water mains, and how those are sort of incorporated into the design and providing sort of the requisite diversion so that we can work around those services but keep the service operational. There's, you know, the challenges with trying to keep the roads closed for a minimum for the effect on the general public and the population of Taffs. Well, there the water main issues that I've mentioned, and you know, the temporary works. We've got to build this bridge as well, but you know what you'll see at the end of the day probably doesn't reflect the amount of effort that will have gone into the temporary works design as well, to facilitate those works. And just as a final reminder there, I guess it's not just us. There's a lot going on in this area, really. We've got us as a structures team, but there's the highways team that have developed fourth blething with all the carriageway and drainage and lighting and street furniture and barrier aspects that have gone into the scheme as well, along with the geotechnical team in supporting the structures and highways work, and indeed the track work, and indeed the depot as a whole. And then going into all the rail disciplines with track signalling, etc., that I've listed there. And an important factor, of course, is the discussions as well with the contractor, the ECI aspects, which we've been doing as we've been going along, and trying to get the design into a situation that that it is follows on to the design phase in a smooth transition. And of course, the interfacing works with the main depot as well as the railway. So another team are developing, the sheds and the car parks and all the track stabling to do with the depot. So there's, from our perspective, a lot been going on. A big interdisciplinary project of which we're just a part. So I hope that's painted a picture of the design for you, and I'll pass over to David Noblet, who's the project manager for Alan Griffiths, I think, unless anybody wants to come in at that stage, Catherine.
We haven't got anything in the chat so far, so yeah, let's go on to David Noblet. That's great. Thank you, Ian.
Okay, next slide, please, Josh. So I'm David Noblet, the project manager for Alan Griffiths. We were appointed in 2018 as the infrastructure delivery partner for CEWales. I'll do a brief overview of our scope for the contract, then we'll go into a bit more detail on how we've delivered these works to date, with sort of sustainability in mind, and how we've delivered those works in line with our commitments. So our scope at the outset involved demolition of the existing buildings within the site, and then subsequent remediation of the site in preparation for its use as a rail depot and control centre. The design and construction of the integrated control centre at the northern end of the site, which is a key building which will actually control the re-signalling of the whole CEWales following the completion of the works. And yeah, we're heavily involved, as Ian mentioned, in the constructability input to the various options as they've been developed, advising on the methodology, programme, costs, impacts that each option had. Particularly, the box jack was a byproduct of that stakeholder engagement and liaison with RCT, based on their feedback of the importance of the Cardiff Road access into Taffs for them as a council, and that was a construction method that was chosen at that time due to its minimal disruption. And as I meant, yeah, we're a Welsh-based contractor with a sort of strong delivery record and commitment to sustainable delivery within the area. So I'll just talk through how we've delivered these works and how these works align with our company's sustainable development plan, and how that aligns with the Future Generations Act. Next slide, please, Josh. So that's just an aerial view of the sort of before and after of the demolition scope. On the left-hand side, that's the Garthworks Industrial Estate as it was, with the largest building in the bottom right-hand corner of that photo being the Forge Masters building. We completed the demolition of the site, started that in June 2019. It was a phased approach taken in order to allow facilitate handover of the site and various businesses to have appropriate time to sort of relocate the site. We used a local supplier, Bond Demolition, to complete the demolition works and the asbestos strip of the various buildings. And then we Griffiths subsequently completed the removal of the hard standing and concrete that was remaining, and removed any obstructions which would be below the proposed depot shed and its stabling lines, and also the control centre. And as you can see in the centre of the right-hand photo, and that gives an idea of the size of some of the obstructions where we've cleared the site, but you can see the footprint of some of the old press bases and other historic obstructions that were found in the grounds. And there's also archaeological interest in the site. We found a series of historic buildings which were also logged, and we facilitated that during the works in conjunction with TFW and AIW. Next slide, please, Josh. And that is an aerial, a recent aerial image of the site. In the right-hand side of the photo, you can see the control centre steel frame. The very northern tip of the site is the control centre, with the new access road, which you can see in parallel to the northeastern tree line. And then the central portion of the site is the depot construction area, and you see the storage areas being established and welfare being established. And then the left-hand side of the photo is the southern portion of the site, which will be used to facilitate the bridge construction works. So that paints a picture of how constrained the site is and how much activity there is going on at once. So it's key that there's a good level of collaboration between the parties involved in our works and also the other parties completing works within the area. Next slide, please, Josh. So yeah, we completed extensive sort of physical investigations into the site during the ECI phase. One of the things Ian mentioned was a supplementary piled wall, which is originally a board pile solution. This had significant cost and time implications. So one of the proposals was to completely see if we could change this to a sheet piled solution, which would have big cost and time savings, and also reduce disruption because there's associated footpath closures required for the works. So that's a sheet pile drivability test you can see on the left-hand side, which we completed. We also completed extensive ground investigation works within the highway on the proposed site of the bridges, which was completed under lane closure in order to minimise disruption, and then also within the site itself and the proposed areas of the jacking slabs. We also tried some ground stabilisation tests and did extensive utilities investigation works. Next slide, please, Josh. And there are also numerous environmental constraints on the site due to its former heavy industrial use. There was several hotspots of contaminated waste within the site, so we completed sort of extensive testing to ensure that only material that was hazardous was locally removed to avoid mass diversion to landfill of the remediated ground. And on the left-hand side there, that's the treatment of invasive species within the site. So that's some Japanese knotweed being incinerated, as there was extensive invasive species as well within the site. Next slide, please, Josh. So in terms of sustainable deliveries, as a company, we've got a company sustainable development plan, and we've developed one for this specific project, which is aligned to our tender commitments we made to TFW during our bid for the works. 7 goals of the Future Generations Act and also our company sustainable strategy. Our company sustainability strategy is linked to the 3 pillars of sustainability, so economic, environmental, and also social and cultural in Wales. Next slide, please, Josh. So in terms of economic delivering the works sustainably from an economic perspective, we've managed to introduce work experience opportunities within the works. We've had work experience placements throughout the works, throughout the demolition and the early works and the investigation works. We've also introduced new apprentices to the works area, and we've also encouraged, or we have encouraged the use of small to medium enterprises through Meet the Buyer events, where we've been able to add companies to our supply chain who are smaller, more local businesses. We also use the Sell to Wales portal to advertise opportunities. And this method of procurement was used for the steelwork for the control centre, which we saw on the previous slide. And we also track our local money multiplier using the Welsh Government's community benefits measure to see how our works are impacting in the area. We've set ourselves a benchmark of £1.90. We're currently tracking at about £1.94 in our latest sustainability data. Next slide, please, Josh. We've also got a series of environmental key performance indicators that we track during the works, which include 5% reduction of carbon emissions year on year, 0 environmental incidents, and an ambition to divert 90% of material from landfill. There's a couple of examples we've completed during the demolition works and the ground remediation. All the hard standing that was excavated during the demolition, the ground remediation works was actually recycled using our in-house crushers and recycling equipment, and then reused to create working platforms within the site. Next slide, please, Josh. And then social and cultural commitments as well, to engage and reinvest with the local community. At the bottom left is a IC Bridge to Schools event. That's pre-COVID-19, where we took the IC Bridge to school, and then you get the children involved in making a replica of the second Severn crossing. That's Mysecoy Primary School. So we've got an objective to visit one local school within the Court Valley Lines area for every £2.5 million spend on the project. We've also established a community good cause fund, where we try to allocate 0.5% of the project value each quarter, and allocate that to support local charities, clubs and community groups. Next slide, please, Josh. So some examples of that is through our community good cause works, we've engaged with local organisations such as the Taffs allotments, and this again is pre-COVID-19. Where we engaged with our public liaison officer, Terry Davis, liaised with the Taffswell allotments, who identified they had a need to clear and reinstate a large area of land that had become overgrown over time and was unsuitable for use. So collaboratively working with AIW and Transport for Wales, we volunteered some time, materials and plant in order to facilitate that clearance to make that area fit for use. Next slide, please, Josh. And also sort of we tried to react to any kind of local events like the flooding during Storm Dennis, which heavily affected Forest and Nantgarw. We reached out to the residents through the local member, who identified that there was a need for skips and storage for the victims of flooding. We, working with our supply chain, we supplied skips to allow them to help clear any damaged property and belongings, and provided secure lockable containers for them to store any goods, and we also shelved those out for the residents so that they could store materials. The benches you can see on the left hand side is a memorial garden which was also washed away during the flooding, so we donated all the timber to reconstruct this memorial garden. So this is it. This is the garden as it is now following this reconstruction. And we've also tried to donate to local companies such as the Taffswell Rugby Club, where we've been able to donate what would otherwise be waste products, such as roof cladding and cladding during the demolition to the rugby club to allow them to repair some outbuildings that they use. Next slide, please, Josh. Yes, that concludes the presentation on how we've been trying to deliver the works sustainably to date. I'll pass you back to Catherine.
Fabulous. Thank you, David. You know, they're really insightful presentations. I find that hugely interesting, from start to finish, the challenges it's presented, digital accomplishments, and actually the collaboration it takes for the project to progress. I urge everybody on this call to ask and pose questions to our speakers today. It's a perfect opportunity to gain that engagement. I do have a hand up. Let me just double check. Hi, Robert. Can I bring you? That's Robert Chapman. Can I bring you in and ask any question that you have for our speakers?
Catherine, thanks for that, and I hope you can hear me.
We can, very well.
Okay. Two really quick questions, if I can recall them, in reverse order. David Noplet. David, I'd be very interested to hear your views on how things are being procured now vis-a-vis the Wellbeing of Future Generations Wales Act, because it seems to me that is making a tangible difference. But that's my personal view. I'd just be interested in your view. The Wellbeing of Future Generations Wales Act world versus the non-world previously. And then the other question I had quickly for David Simpson around the kind of the engineering feat here, which seems really excellent, was how everyone worked together. What was the secret of that success? Those are my two questions.
Yeah, no problem. So with regards to the procurements, we've been using the Sell to Wales portal on the scheme, which has been very useful, and we advertised a Meet the Buyer event using that, and it was quite surprising how many companies there were within the area who would be suitable to complete the works that we as a business were not particularly aware of. So it was definitely a benefit to us as a company to extend our supply chain and introduce some of these smaller and medium size enterprises to that. And yeah, as you say, it definitely has a positive impact in the wider area. So one thing we've also tried to do as a business in the past few years is we have engaged with companies and tried to help them get into where they are, perhaps not so familiar with working in the rail environment or other parts which may be kind of a potential blocker to getting work on for a sort of a tier 1 or tier 2 principal contractor. Is we've spent time to try and help develop them, and that allows them to then get further opportunities within the supply chain. So it's definitely a mutually beneficial approach to take to procurement we've found as a business.
Thank you.
Yeah, I guess I mean, it has been challenging, and we're certainly not out of the woods yet in terms of that. But I guess it's collaboration with the various stakeholders and with the various design teams, and having the regular interface meetings that we kind of develop between the various disciplines to inform how each is part of the project as a whole is ongoing, and how that can impact other disciplines and other areas, so that we can react to those aspects that are raised and kind of developed, I suppose. It's been a process whereby things are not known. There's a lot of discovery and surveys that are going on throughout the whole process, and as those become known, then the various details are shared between the various disciplines to see their various impacts on that. So I mean, it's like all things, I guess it's good communication between not only the people and disciplines doing the design, but the various stakeholders as well, and having that regular dialogue and getting people on board with what we're trying to do, and if possible knowing where the limitations and the absolute restrictions are that you can't kind of cross, if you like. So collaboration at the end of the day is the big word, I think.
Thank you.
That's super. Thank you, Robert, for your questions to the speakers. I wonder at this stage, please again do raise a hand, do put things in the chat box. If I can bring Mark Adams in from Constructing Excellence Wales, who's been involved with the project, just to add some insight or some further questions. Mark, can I bring you in? No. Do we have Mike Edmonds on the meeting?
Yeah, Kath. Yeah, I'm here. Yeah, I thought it was a really interesting presentation, and just for a relatively small area, it has a huge number of challenges, and I think the team, for me, seem to be approaching those challenges in a very collaborative way. So small part of a major project, but it's good to see that the principles of what CEW stand for, collaboration, are being embraced at the outset. So for me, it's really encouraging, and look forward to the sort of the further phases.
Thanks, Mike. Mark, I can see you're with us. Are you there, Mark Adams?
Yes, I am.
Hi, Mark.
Yeah, I'd just like to sort of congratulate the team and say it's nice to get this Exemplar programme back up and running within CEW. Obviously, there's been a lot of collaboration here, a lot of early contractor involvement, all exactly what we like to see with our exemplars. Just to say that there will be a case study written up on this exemplar. That'll be going on our website probably in a couple of months' time. And we have got a programme of projects that we're developing with TFW that will run through this exemplar programme. And just to say to anybody else who's attending that we're keen to discuss with other clients, contractors, consultants, their projects that they might wish to put through the exemplar process. So just encourage people to get in touch with Catherine or Sue to start discussions on that.
Thanks, Mark. That's great. So I'll conclude the meeting, but if anyone does have a further question, we still have time to take that. So do please put up your hand. But I just thank you all for attending the meeting today. It's hugely insightful, and I hope it's given you inspiration and demonstrates how collaboration can build so much into a project. I do have a question. Will the team be working on the station enhancements too? Is a question from somebody as well. I don't know if anyone can pick that up.
Alan Griffiths are also the IDP for the station enhancements, but it's a separate team within Alan Griffiths. But it is also the same stakeholders: AIW, Amy Consulting, but yeah, different members of the organisations. But there are station enhancements at Taffs, which is another interface where we're all working together to make sure that the sequencing of these works and how they all coordinate within the site works and tries to minimise disruption to the public.
I think that's key, isn't it? Thank you, David. Well, just again, thank you all for joining us today. We will disseminate the slides following the event to all attendees. If there are any further questions, we did have a conversation, and the team of presenters will all be happy to take that following the event as well. So do get in contact with us. I'd like to thank Sam, Adam, Ian and David for your really fantastic presentations on the project. And we do have the next meeting of our Exemplar programme on the Bow Street station on the 25th of March at midday. For anyone who wants to join us in that case study and that presentation. As Mark Adam said, this case study will be written up on the Taffs depot, and we look forward to you looking at that as well, which will be hosted on our website. And anyone interested in becoming a Constructing Excellence Exemplar, please do get in touch with myself and Susan Selkirk, and we'll distribute our contact details as well following the event. So many thanks all. I hope you have a great afternoon, and we look forward to meeting you with future events in the future. Thank you very much. Bye all.
Thanks. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.